Welcome back, casual gardeners. It is too hot in the greenhouse today, but I am committed to the bit. And that bit is playing doctor. No, not that way. I mean like with plants. It's not that kind of channel. So the goal today is we're going to talk about troubleshooting issues with starting seeds. And how am I qualified to talk about this? Well, I've started a lot of seeds, so I might know what I'm talking about. Plus, I did research on the internet. I mean, it's on the internet. It's got to be true, right? What else could it be? So we're going to start with probably the most common scenario. You planted your seeds and nothing came up. What could be the cause? So possibility number one is you planted bad seed. And I don't mean like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I mean like maybe your seeds were too old. Different seeds are good for different amounts of time. So corn is going to be good for 1 year, maybe 2 years tops, which means that if you're growing corn, you should be getting seed year after year or collecting seed from what you've grown to plant the following year. You don't get to store corn for very long if you want to have a good yield. Tomatoes and peppers, on the other hand, you can store the seeds for 3 to 5 years if you've got good storage conditions. So you can plant seeds for tomatoes from like the year before last and expect to have most of them come up. Meanwhile, some seeds like beans under ideal storage conditions can last forever. Now, when I'm talking about ideal storage conditions, I mean you're going to want low humidity, low temperature, and you're going to want no light. None of that, no light. If you think about when they find the 2,000-year-old seeds or whatever in Egyptian tombs and they plant them and they grow, those seeds have been stored under amazing conditions like no humidity, no light, and because they're underground, the temperature is consistently low and stable. And that brings us to the other possibility. Maybe your seeds aren't too old, but they were not stored under ideal conditions and they expired prematurely. And that's easy to do, especially if, like I know I've left seed packets out in my greenhouse, and greenhouses are all over the place temperature-wise. They're hot, they're cold, they're humid, they're dry, and they're very, very bright. And so, of course, I wasted those seeds. I didn't even try to germinate those seeds because I was a very naughty seed storing kind of boy. One popular rule of thumb is called the 100 rule, and that is that your humidity plus your temperature should not exceed 100. It is a rule of thumb. It is not a real rule. It's just, to help your brain wrap around it. So if you've got a humidity of 30%, you don't want your temperature to get up above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is 100. Added together. I know the units don't match. If there are chemists or physicists out there, stay mad. Just stay mad. You hurt me in college, I'm gonna hurt you back. All right, reason number 2 your seeds may not have come up is you got the temperature wrong. So when you're growing the seeds, you got your cold boys and you got your warm boys, and they need very different conditions. A good way to remember who's who is, are these crops that you're going to be planting early in the spring when conditions are cool? Then they probably need cool germination temperatures. But if you're planting seeds for the warm season, they probably need warm germination temperatures. Some of our cool boys can't even germinate if the temperatures are too high. They'll just be like, nope, sorry, this is not my time. Temperatures that are too cool will make our warm boys take too long to germinate. They will reduce the germination rate in general, and those seeds will be more likely to succumb to fungus before they germinate, which means you get no plants. So good examples of your warm boys are your tomatoes, your beans, your peppers, your melons. Not my melons. My melons are cool. Good examples of your cool boys would be lettuce and all of the cabbage family and onions. All the cool weather stuff. Now, some of our cool boys can get pretty warm and still be okay. So it's not, again, it's just a rule of thumb. Possibility number 3 Oh my gosh, there's so much we can get wrong. Can you believe we do this for fun? So number 3 is you either didn't get the right amount of light or you had poor soil contact. We need soil contact because the soil is where the moisture is, and the moisture needs to move into the seed to help the seed know it's time to germinate. So if you sprinkle your seeds on top of your soil and you don't press them down, assuming it's something like lettuce that needs light to germinate, then you will have poor soil contact, and even though it's sprinkled on top of the soil and it's under light, it won't germinate because it's not getting wet enough. Alternatively, say you didn't know that lettuce needs light to germinate, and maybe you buried your seeds too deep, like a 1/4 inch or more deep in the soil. Those aren't going to come up because they're too deep. There are also some seeds that need darker conditions and need to be planted deep. Beans, especially broad beans or fava beans, are going to need to be planted about 2 inches deep, at least, maybe 3. And so these are seeds that don't need light and do need a lot of good soil contact. So reason number 4, we're not done with even the first problem yet. Pests or diseases could be killing your seeds before they even have a chance to come up. So to avoid that, you want to use clean pots and you want to use a sterile growing medium if you're growing indoors. If you're growing outdoors, of course, you have neither of those things, and still it mostly works out okay. The reason for that is conditions indoors are just more sheltered, and those pests and pathogens are more concentrated and don't have natural predators, and they go to town. Reason number 5, there is something wrong with your soil. Your particle size could be wrong. Your water retention could be wrong. And finally, number 6 reason your seeds do not come up at all could be inconsistent watering. So for example, lettuce seeds, carrot seeds, all of the seeds you're planting shallowly are more likely to dry out between watering and may need to be watered more often to keep them from drying out. If we're starting seeds indoors, we can combat this problem by covering our seed tray. Remember that once seeds start coming up, we need to uncover the seed tray or else we'll have a different set of problems. If we're planting outdoors, one trick is you can put a piece of wood or a piece of cardboard over your carrot seeds and remove it to water them a couple times a day and then replace it. That will help that water be retained around your seeds. Another issue is maybe your seeds can be too wet. If your seeds are too wet and too cool, that's going to, of course, lead to fungal issues. We can finally move on to the next problem. That was a lot of time to devote to your seeds not even starting. So problem number 2 is your seeds come up and then they wither and die, which is totally an issue we can have. And you can have that issue no matter how experienced a gardener you are. So if you're a brand new gardener and you brought up some seeds and then they went, please don't feel bad. It happens to everybody.
That happens to everyone sometimes.
So one problem you might be having that is causing your seedlings to come up and then wither and die is the issue of nutrition. Seed starting mixes tend to be low in nutrients, and the reason they are low in nutrients is because people believe that too many nutrients will contribute to a phenomenon called damping off. We're going to talk about damping off later in the section, so hold on. So if you notice true leaves forming and you know your seed starting mix is poor in nutrients, as soon as you start getting your first true leaves, add a liquid fertilizer at about half or 1/4 concentration to the water that you're adding to your soil, and then you're feeding when you water. And that will give your little seedlings the nutrients they need to keep on growing up. Light may be an issue, and I don't mean too much light. You rarely have too much light for your seedlings, even growing outdoors under the direct sun, which is brighter than anything you'll ever have indoors. So usually it's too little light. Just like low nutrition, low light is going to result in a paler color to your leaves on your seedlings. You'll also see that they tend to stretch toward the light because they're trying to get more of it. You can differentiate between too little light and too few nutrients because, well, two things. If it's too few nutrients, you'll see it's darker around the veins of your leaves and then paler between the veins. If it's too little light, your leaf will be uniformly pale. Also, it's probably the light thing. Because even if you're growing next to a sunny window, a lot of modern windows are designed for energy efficiency, and they're going to be filtering out some wavelengths of light. You may still not be getting the hours that your seedlings need. So ideally, you want to blast them. You want really bright lights as close as you can get to them without burning them. If it feels like too much light, it still may not be enough light. Just go to town. Water continues to be an issue after germination. Too much water will, especially if you're not in warmer conditions, will result in fungal growth, and that can clog up your roots of your seedlings and make them die. Alternatively, you can develop an issue called damping off. Damping off is also a fungal issue. That's where the little fungal threads actually penetrate up into the stem of the plant and they clog it. It can no longer draw nutrients up from the roots and it dies. To avoid damping off, you want to provide a lot of air movement. Again, you want to have used clean media. Keep that water under control. Allow your soil to dry down a little bit before you add more water. And actually, the strong light will help avoid damping off as well. If you're growing outside and your seedlings come up and then disappear, it could be cutworms or some other pest, possibly even birds, slugs, snails, isopods, earwigs. A lot of things love to eat those tender baby plants. So consider starting under cloches or putting some netting over your starts, or there are specialized collars you can put around your seedlings to help keep the cutworms off if that's a problem in your area. There are non-toxic snail and slug baits you can apply. If you are growing inside, there is a common pest you want to be on the lookout for, and that is fungus gnats. These are those little fruit fly looking guys that kind of buzz around your houseplants and your seedlings when you start them inside. The adults that you can see are super duper annoying, but they are not the problem. The problem is that they will lay eggs in your soil around your plants. They love them some damp soil, and then those eggs will hatch and the maggots crawl down into the soil and will actually chew on the roots of your plants. More mature plants like these guys or house plants are usually well enough developed that there aren't enough maggots in the soil to kill them completely. But less mature plants like our little baby seedlings don't have that root development, and it doesn't take a lot of fungus gnat maggots to just completely kill them off. I would not recommend using insecticides to control fungus gnats because when we're starting in seeds indoors, it's usually for food. So instead, you can buy or make yellow sticky traps. The fungus gnats seem to be really attracted to the yellow, and then they stick to the sticky trap, and these are the adults. So you're not directly killing the maggots, but since the maggots come from the adults, you're reducing the number of adults that lay the eggs in the soil, and maybe some of your seedlings will be okay. Next problem. Last problem. Say your plants come up and they're growing very, very slowly, and you suspect there may be a problem. This is going to be a light issue or a nutrition issue. If it's light, again, the leaves are going to be very pale, and they're going to be uniformly pale. If it's a nutrition issue, the leaves are going to have dark around the veins, but then shade off to light in between the veins. Fertilizer, used at low strength for younger plants. As the plants get older, if you're careful not to burn your plants, you can add more concentrated fertilizers. Will help with nutrition issues. Hammering them with the light will help with light issues. Later on in your plant's development, you're going to run into a point where there's not enough light in your house and they're too tall to continue hanging out under your lights. And when that happens, things are going to get awkward, like almost as awkward as watching one of these videos. Because what you got to do is every day you got to watch, is the temperature right for my plants? Yes, it is. Move all the plants out, let them soak up that sunlight, start hardening them off, and then as temperatures drop too low again, you can move them back inside. It's a dance. If you're starting a lot of peppers or a lot of tomatoes, it's a dance you'll get tired of. But if you're moving them in and out so they get a bit more light, you'll get less stretching, you'll have happier plants, and when it finally is time to plant them out, you won't have to harden them off. Now that's all the problems I could think of that I've personally had starting plants from seeds, both indoors and outdoors. If you have some seed starting issues that you think I didn't cover, or you think maybe there's a different cause, you should talk about that down in the comments, because we're all helping each other out. Gardening is hard and also somehow relaxing, but always delicious. Thank you so much for joining me here in my garden. I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.